دياك. All right, so let's start
دكتور
let's start talking about today, inshallah, we are going to talk about questions in English. You know, we have two types of questions. We have yes, no questions, and we have WH questions. And today, inshallah, I'm going to talk about them in details. Let's start with yes, no questions, structures. Yes, no question structures in English. The question should start with auxiliary plus subject plus verb plus complement. Auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. Auxiliary, subject, verb, and complement. Now, if you look at this example here, auxiliary, do, subject, the buses, verb, run every day. Okay? Auxiliary, do, subject, the buses, and the verb, run every day. So this is the structure of yes, no questions in English. The auxiliary could be one of the verb to be. Am, is, are, was, were. It could be one of the verb to do. Do, does, did. It could be one of the verb have. Have to do, have, has, had. It could be one of the modal verbs. Can, could, shall, should, may, might, and so on. So the auxiliary could be one of these groups. Verb to be, verb to do, verb to have, and modal verbs. Now, yes, no questions in English, there are two basic types of questions. As I said before, we have yes, no questions, and we have WH questions. Why do we call them WH questions? We call them WH questions because they start with WH. Because they start with WH words, so we call them WH questions. Yes, no questions, we call them yes, no questions because the answer will be either yes or no. So we call them yes, no questions because the answer will be yes or no. Yes, no questions are also called closed questions. We call them closed questions. يعني أسئلة مغلقة. Because there are only two possible responses. Yes or no. If you ask a question using a yes, no question, the answer, you expect an answer yes or no. For example, is she a student? The answer will be yes or no. Do you live in Erbil? Yes or no. Does she study translation? Yes or no. Has she lifted early? Yes or no. Can you play the piano? The answer will be yes or no. When forming a yes no question, as I said before, it must include one of these verbs. Verb to be, verb to do, verb to have, and a modal verb. It is impossible to ask a yes no question without one of these verbs. So you cannot ask a question without having or without using one of these verbs. Let's consider the following examples. Use the verb be to ask yes no question about the identity. We use verb to be to ask about the identity or description of a person, a place, or thing. We use verb to be in yes no questions to ask about identity, description of a person, place, or thing. Am I your friend? The answer will be yes. Yes, you are. Or yes, you are my friend. Yes. Or yes, you are. Yes, you are my friend. Or no, no, you aren't. No, you are not my friend. Okay, if the answer is no. Is this a good restaurant? No. You can answer no, or you can say no, it isn't, or no, it isn't a good restaurant. So if you say no, that's enough. If you say no, it isn't, also this is good. If you say no, it is not a good restaurant, this is also acceptable in English. All right? Use the verb to be with a preposition to ask yes no question about a present or past location. We use verb to be with a preposition to ask a yes no question about a present or past location. A present or past location. Am I at the correct location? Am I at the correct location? No. The answer will be no, you aren't. Or no, you aren't at the correct location. Am I at the correct? At the correct. So we use the preposition at here. Are the keys under the box? Are the keys under the box? No. No, they aren't. No. No, they aren't. No, they aren't under the box. So you can say no. No, they aren't. No, they aren't under the box. All right? We use verb to be also to ask yes no questions about a current activity or a situation. This requires the present progressive. This requires the present progressive. Use the verb be, as I said, to ask yes no questions about a current activity or situation. This requires the present progressive. Be plus verb ing. If you remember, we said that we use verb to be as auxiliary verbs and yes no questions. Okay, if we have the auxiliary verb in the sentence, we can use it. If we don't have an auxiliary verb, we have to add verb to do. Do, did, or does. Now, look at this question here. Was it raining? Was it raining? So the sentence was, it was raining. The sentence was, it was raining. Here we have the auxiliary verb was. So what we did here, we moved the auxiliary verb instead of the subject and the subject instead of the auxiliary verb. The result was a yes no question. Was it was raining? The question, was it raining? Yes, yes it was, or no, no it wasn't, or no it wasn't raining. Were they playing? The sentence was, They were playing. By the time we form a yes/no question, what we did here, we moved the auxiliary verb instead of the subject and the subject instead of the auxiliary verb. All right? Okay? Now, use the verb to be to ask a yes/no question with a passive voice. Now, in the passive voice, we have to have the auxiliary verb, by the way. If you look at this question here, is gold mined in Canada? Canada is a gold is mined in Canada. So this is the sentence. Gold is mined in Canada. Now, if you'd like to make a yes/no question, what we did here, we moved the subject instead of the auxiliary verb and the auxiliary verb instead of the subject. So is gold mined in Canada? Yes, yes, it is. Yes, it is mined in Canada. No, no, it isn't. No, it isn't mined in Canada. Are flowers grown here? No. No, they aren't. No, they aren't grown here. Okay? All right. So flowers are grown here. This is the sentence. Flowers are grown here. Now, to form a yes/no question, we move the subject instead of the auxiliary verb and the opposite. What do we call this movement? We call it subject-verb inversion. Subject-verb inversion. We call it subject-verb inversion. Inversion means what? What do we mean by this? We move the subject instead of the auxiliary verb and the auxiliary verb instead of the subject. Now, we use verb to ask if somebody has done something or if some action has taken place. Note that these yes/no questions use the present perfect. Use the present perfect to ask about if somebody has done something or if some action has taken place. Has your brother left? So the sentence is, your brother has left. Your brother has left. What we have done here, again, we did subject-verb inversion. We move the subject instead of the auxiliary verb and the auxiliary verb instead of the subject. So the question becomes what? Has your brother left? No, no, he hasn't. No, he hasn't left. Yes, yes, he has. Yes, he has left. Have you driven before? You have driven before. So the sentence was, you have driven before. So we move the verb instead of the subject and the subject instead of the verb. All right. We did subject-verb inversion. Subject-verb inversion. Have you driven before? Yes. Yes, I have. Yes, I have driven before. Or no. No, I haven't. No, I haven't driven before. Now, use the verb to do, to ask yes/no questions in order to obtain facts about people, places, or things. We use verb to do to ask yes/no questions in order to obtain facts about people, places, or things. Do they smoke? No. No, they don't. No, they don't smoke. Yes. Yes, they do. Yes, they smoke. Use modal verbs to ask yes/no questions about possibilities or uncertainties. So we have to keep in mind that the use of auxiliaries is not haphazardly. You should use the adequate or the correct or the accurate auxiliary verb in your question, depending on the question that you'd like to ask. What is your question? Are you asking about certainty? Are you asking about possibilities? Are you asking about somebody, if somebody has done something or not? Are you asking about facts? Are you asking about place, or so on? So you have to keep in mind that when you ask a yes/no question, you have to make sure that you use the accurate or the right auxiliary verb. Can we stay? Yes. Yes, we can. Yes, we can stay. No. No, we can't. No, we can't stay. So here we are asking about possibility. We are asking about possibility. Now, remember, when asking yes/no questions, with do or a modal verb, the main verb remains in the base form. You should keep in mind that when you ask a question, especially yes/no question, using do or modal verb, the verb in the sentence must remain in the base form without to. Do you drink coffee? Or does she drink coffee? You can't say does she drinks coffee. You can't say that, because after verb to do that does, or modal verbs in general, you have to use base form of the verb. However, if there are two verbs, imagine you have two verbs in the question, what will you do here? The second verb remains in the infinitive. The second verb remains in the infinitive. For example, do you want to drink coffee? The sentence was, I want to drink coffee. Now, we always use want with to with want. To always follows want. In this case, we have two verbs. We have want and we have drink. And we have a preposition to infinitive. So in the question, we should use the to infinitive with the second verb. It will remain as it is. So the to infinitive will remain as it is in questions if we have a to infinitive in the question. Now, so this is for yes/no questions. We will move to WH questions. And inshallah, I'm not going to cover all this material today. I'm going, inshallah, to talk about WH questions in general. And in the next lecture, inshallah, we will talk about them in details. What do you mean by WH questions? What are WH questions? Why do they call them WH questions? They call them WH questions because they start with words that start with WH, such as what, who, which, whom, and so on, where, when, and so on. So they call them WH questions. Now, the structure of the WH question, it should start with WH word plus auxiliary plus subject plus verb. Again, WH word, auxiliary, subject plus verb. What's the difference between WH? I'm talking about the structures of yes no questions and WH questions. The only difference is that in the WH questions we have a WH word. In yes no questions we don't have WH words. So the structure of the questions, the structure of yes no question is auxiliary, subject plus verb plus complement. However, the structure of the WH questions, it's the same. However, we should start with the question with we should start the question with a WH word. Look at this picture here. This picture gives us a general view about WH word or WH questions, WH question words, their use, their function, and examples. But this is, as I said, this is a general view. I'm going, inshallah, to talk about them in details. I'm going to talk about them in details. Number one, what? We use what to ask about specific thing and object. If you'd like to ask about an object, you should use what? If you'd like to ask about a specific thing, you should use what? What is your name? What is this? What is the right answer? What is wrong with you? Okay, so we are asking about a specific object, specific thing. Now, what for? What plus the preposition for. We use this structure when we ask for a reason. What did you do that for? What did you do that for? So here you are asking about the reason. I did this in order to write something, to do something, and so on. Next, we have when. We use when to talk about time, occasion, and a moment. Time, occasion, and a moment. When did he leave? When will you arrive? When will your party be? Okay? Where? We use where to ask about a position, about place. Where do they live? Where do you study? Where did he go? And so on. We use which to ask about choices, alternatives. Which color do you want? Which book do you want to read? Which car do you want to buy? And so on. Who to ask about persons, especially subjects. Who opened the door? Whom also to ask about subject, but it should be what? It should be an object. Whom did you see? Whom did you call? Whom did you meet? Whose? Whose ownership? We use whose to talk about ownership. Whose are these keys? Whose are these keys? Whose are these books? Who's this mobile? Who's this mobile? And so on. Why? We use why to ask about reason. Why do you say that? Why do you think that? Why do you confirm that? Why do you write that? Why don't? To make a suggestion. Why don't you take a nap? Why don't you write a story? Why don't you travel to a certain place? Why don't you talk to him? Why don't you explain the reason to your professor, for example? How? We use how to ask about the way, the manner, and the form. How does this work? How does this work? How do you do this? How do you do this? How far? Distance. How far is it from Australia to New Zealand? How far is it from Erbil to Amman? And so on. How long? To ask about length of time or space. How long will it take? Or how long does it take from Erbil to Amman? How many? When we use how many, we use it to ask about quantity, countable nouns. How many cars are there? How many people are there? How many students are there? How many passers are there? How many failures are there? How much? Quantity, uncountable. How much money do you have? How much tea do we have? How much sugar do we have? All right? To ask about uncountable nouns. How old? It has only one use in English. How old are you? How old are you? We don't have another question for how old. Who and whom are used to obtain information about a person or people. As I said, who. We use it for persons, subjects. Whom for persons, objects. Who's at the door? Tom is at the door. Whom is he dating? Or who is he dating? He's dating Anna. Now, we can use who instead of whom, but not the opposite. We can use who instead of whom, but we can't use whom instead of who. All right? We can use who instead of whom, but we cannot use whom instead of who. What is used to request information about somebody or something? What is this? This is a bird. What did he say? She said to be quiet. Now, what is used to also to ask or to request information about somebody or about something? When is used to obtain information about the time period in which an action occurs. When does Anna arrive? She arrives at 10:30. Where is used to obtain information about a location of a person or thing? Where were the keys? The keys were in the car. Why, as I said, is used to obtain information about the reason something happens or the reason somebody does something. Why is the street closed? Why is the street closed? They are repairing it. How is used to obtain information about the way something happens or the manner or way somebody behaves or does something. How does this work? Push the red button. How does this work? Push the red button. Which is used to obtain information in order to make a comparison between two or more similar things or people. Which of these pens is the best? The black one. Which color do you prefer? Which car do you prefer? Which coffee do you prefer? All right? Whose is used to obtain information about who something belongs to. Whose book is on the table? Whose car is this? And so on. Now, I will stop here